This is Sharon here. If you've been enjoying the podcast and you're in Perth, come along to my lecture where we can connect in person to talk about the key to feeling fully alive. Tickets are available via the link on our homepage, emotionresearch.com.au. See you there. Now back to the show.
This is the Emotion Connection, where you'll experience health through feeling. Explore emotion from a different perspective and learn how to use your emotions to improve your day-to-day life. Introducing your host, founder of the Emotion Research Institute and creator of Emotional Strength, Sharon Faye. Sharon heads up a successful business empowering leaders to bring about organisational development and cultural change. Get your senses ready as we delve into the many facets of emotion together. Over to Sharon.
Hello, I'm Sharon Faye. Emotion is my thing. Today's podcast is on building emotional strength in teachers, a pilot study. And the overview first to tell you all about the pilot study, the teacher surveys and the student surveys and the results and discussion. And for those of you who haven't seen the researcher in me yet, buckle up because I love research and most people are bored by research, but I love it. I just want to share a bit of an overview in that some of you remember, and those of you who don't can listen to podcast number 4, but most of you would know that I had a experience with education in my early life and I didn't have a great time, and that's what podcast number 4 goes to in detail, so I won't do that here. But it makes sense that the Sharon Faye Foundation, as it was known then, was going to really view education as one of the 6 pillars, because emotion and education is so important to me that it makes sense that I would want to, as you do too, want to improve the education of our children. I think we all want that. So this is in 2016 when the foundation did a lot of research. We did a research study for 1 whole year. That was a lot of research, a lot of work, and I can't thank the people involved enough for the hard work that they put in on that research effort. And then it was amazing timing that in 2017 the Grattan report came out, and the Grattan Institute report is really looking at Australia and education. They report on education. Education is a really big part of what they report on. So that was perfect timing. And they presented or released their report card on Australian education. And they highlighted, and the one I was very interested in myself, highlighted 40% of school students were disengaged or unproductive. Now you think about that. 40%. And this is disengaged students really affects their learning, and you will know that with your own children. If your children become disengaged, you know how hard it is to reach them. So for teachers attempting to get anything taught in the classroom is very, very difficult. And these students who are passively disengaged fall behind in their learning. And 2 or 3 years, they fall behind their peers. Now, these are not children that are disruptive, or they're not acting out, they're not doing anything. They're just sitting quietly in the classroom, looking like they're learning, and they're not learning. So now this is very frustrating for teachers, and when I looked at the research, You know, one of the most stressful things for teachers is to try and reach a disengaged student. And with students disengaged, that puts a lot of pressure on teachers. So the Grattan Institute report were looking at the data on what drives disengagement and low-level disruption. And they were only guessing, they couldn't really come up with an answer. They said the data is limited in this area on what drives this disengagement. And they say, well, it could be the consequences of students being uninterested in what they're learning. Could be students being unhappy at home or in the schoolyard, or it could be poor quality teaching. Now, I didn't necessarily think it was poor quality teaching, but what I considered was perhaps the teachers were disengaged themselves, but they didn't realise, they didn't know. And we know what that's like when we become disengaged. We have to have someone to say, wake up! So maybe these teachers are just disengaged without knowing. And then the students are responding to them, which is what we know happens. And other research goes around looking for, well, what's wrong with the student that they became disengaged, or they actively participate in passive disaffection, really. So what is it about the student? And I was more interested in what is it about the teacher, really. So our study was based on the premise that when teachers change, students change. Now, you know this in your own life, when as parents and bosses, when you change, everything else changes. And that's what I've certainly discovered as well. So we took this on board in the design of our study, and we measured teacher and student engagement, which included student disaffection. Now, I'm interested in this student disaffection because it's not assuming that it's the absence of engagement. It's a bit more than that I'll go into. So I was very interested in that because at school I was a very disengaged student. You know, at least in moving from school to school, state to state, as you've heard me say, I didn't really cause any trouble, not until I got to high school, but I didn't cause any trouble. I was quiet and withdrawn. And teachers really didn't know, well, I don't know, but I suppose teachers really didn't know what to do with me. So they just ignored me because there was nothing else they could do. It's not the teacher's fault. So it took another year after that research, because I love research, I love finding out all that. It took another year to gain the relevant approvals to conduct research in a local primary school. And you may not know, but as a researcher, I know that it's not easy conducting quality applied research anywhere, and it takes time. And that's certainly what we found as well. So in 2018, our research team at the Foundation designed and conducted a pilot study in a local primary school. I was amazed when I went out recruiting for schools to take an interest, because of course they're not paying for this, so research is of benefit to all parties usually. And when I went out to gain some expressions of interest, I was surprised at the amount of schools that had put their hand up to participate in this research. At the time, I could only take one school, and that was a shame because I could have taken many more. I just didn't have the resources to do that then. And it's common in education research to do pre-test, post-test design. And that just means that we administer some questionnaires before we do anything, and then we use those same measures after we do that thing. And that thing in particular is called an intervention, and that was building emotional strength in teachers. That was the intervention. So the pre-test, give the teachers and the students questionnaires, same questionnaires after, and we see the difference. The Grattan report was very aligned, and we were very aligned with the Grattan report. It was amazing timing, I still can't believe it, that we chose 3 surveys to be administered to teachers, including teacher burnout, teacher engagement, and teachers' perception of school climate, because school climate was mentioned in the Grattan report as well. Well, you know as well as I do that the report highlighted that the classroom environment is really important for effectiveness in student learning. And so they were looking at the quality of the classroom environment to improve academic learning. Now that's important as well, but because my thing is emotion, I'm always interested in what the teacher's doing and how the students are responding. We didn't work with the students because I was interested in working with the teachers, but 2 questionnaires were administered to the students, and these were the students of the teachers that were in the study. And we measured student engagement. I was particularly interested in student disaffection, and student disaffection was defined as more than the absence of engagement. It's reflecting passivity and withdrawal from learning activities, accompanied by emotions such as boredom, frustration, and anxiety in the classroom. Now, when I think about myself as that little child in the classroom, I would have been one of those children with disaffection. It's the absence of engagement, so that's right, I wasn't engaged. I would have been inside of me at that time, I remember it really well. Nothing made sense. So the teacher may have been making noise coming out of her mouth, but I couldn't hear it, I couldn't learn it, I couldn't listen to it. It made no sense to me. So huge cognitive decline there. And then I was passive, because anyone could have watched me at that time and seen how passive I was. I wasn't acting out or running amok. And I was withdrawn from learning activities. Like I was so shy and so withdrawn that I just couldn't move into a group. I would just prefer to run away. And I don't think it says accompanied by emotions such as boredom. I don't think I was even at the stage of knowing I was bored, because I just couldn't learn. And I was probably frustrated with myself, and I would be very anxious, but completely disconnected. So yeah, I would have scored high on disaffection. So when we look at the results, it was absolutely fascinating to me, because we were right. We worked with the teachers over a 30-week period, and we found statistically significant increases in teacher engagement, particularly vigour and dedication. That makes sense. These results indicated that when teachers build emotional strength over that time, it was 30 weeks, they feel improved vigour and dedication. So dedication on this scale refers to being strongly involved in their work and experiencing a sense of significance, so you're making a difference. Enthusiasm, because when you make a difference you get more enthusiastic. Inspiration, so if you're making a difference in the classroom every day, or you've helped a student get, understand something they couldn't understand before, you feel proud as a teacher. And so building emotional strength in these teachers, the results were very promising, which then motivates us to do further research on building emotional strength in teachers in the future. And as you can tell, the reason we're excited about these results is that it's harder to get results when we have small sample sizes. Like this study, we had very small sample sizes. And the problem with small sample sizes is it is more difficult to find statistical significance, which is indicating that we did something and the pre-post results differed at a particular level that is significant in statistical terms. And that's the reason this is such a strong result, because we had small sample size. And the student results were equally fascinating and joy to my heart, because one questionnaire that was administered to students measuring student engagement and student disaffection. Now, this was by Skinner and her colleagues in 2009, and the reason I mention that particularly is because the work that Skinner and her colleagues have done on student engagement is exceptional, and they've written some very good papers over time, and their measures of engagement and disaffection are outstanding. And the reason that I mentioned before about why we chose to measure student disaffection and engagement was because of the Grattan report. It was reported as a silent problem affecting 1 in 4 students in Australia. So we thought that was very important. And the results indicated a statistically significant reduction in behavioural disaffection and emotional disaffection. That means we reduced anger, student anger. Isn't that amazing? Even though as well the raw data indicated a reduction in the other parts of the measure as well, emotional disaffection and overall emotional disaffection. And we didn't get statistically significant results for the last two, but we achieved them for the first two. And I was very excited about that. So the teacher-student engagement findings are very interesting, connecting improved teacher engagement with a reduction in student disaffection. For me, the most surprising finding was that of a reduction in student anger and boredom. This is a promising result for future research. And it makes sense, doesn't it, that if the teacher improves their own engagement within themselves, then the students respond to the teacher. And we've seen that so many times, but it's wonderful to get data around it. It's wonderful to design a study and show that actually this is the case. And we know that intuitively and from a common sense perspective. But there's something very satisfying in getting results through data. Well, for me anyway. To recap, I spoke about the overview of the pilot study, the reasons why we actually conducted it, the teacher surveys, teacher engagement was the main interest, student surveys, which involve student engagement and disaffection, and the results being a statistically significant reduction in student disaffection, including anger and boredom, which I was very excited about, being emotion is my thing. So the homework this week is a bit more difficult I want you to discover when you are passively disengaged in any given moment. So remember, everything I give you is only in a moment. Whether you're a caregiver, a parent, employee, manager or CEO, Can you identify when you are passively disengaged? That would be interesting. And when you are engaged, notice that too. When you're disengaged, notice that. See if you can tell the difference between what makes you engaged and what makes you disengaged. Because we know that when you're engaged, your people are engaged. Some examples may or may not be helpful from the Grattan report. A passive disengaged person can be described as intermittent workers. So that means you're not working all day productively. You might stop-start, you might get distracted. So intermittent workers, they're calling it. Employees might work when they believe they are being watched. Bosses know this, but tend to go off task when the boss is not around. Do you want to take the easy way? They're calling it an easy rider. You may work more slowly than others, and you might find ways to extend routine tasks without attracting anyone's attention. So there are some examples of how you might go about this homework. So hang in there and keep working to complete at least some of this homework. It's quite difficult. Makes a real difference in your life if you have a go. Let me know how you go with practicing identifying when you're disengaged. I would love to hear about your experiences. As usual, you can leave a comment in Spotify, you can send an email with your comments. There's lots of ways that you can make a comment or engage in the podcasts. So that'd be a good one for you to take on. How about you practice engaging with the podcast, since it's similar to your homework? So the next podcast is on vulnerability. Now, I'm the queen of vulnerability, and I've mentioned it before briefly, but I'm going to do a podcast on it because vulnerability has got a bit of a hard time over the years, and some people think that being vulnerable is a weakness or it's not a good thing. So I'm going to explore that in the next podcast, and it'll be very interesting. Lots of learning there. See you next time.
Well, that's a wrap. The Emotion Connection is produced by Sharon Faye and her team at the Emotion Research Institute. With a vision to help people feel, this is just one way we're spreading the word. From our hub in Perth, Western Australia, our goal is to advance global research on human emotion and bring together the world's best scholars to conduct rigorous research into emotion all in one place. Would you like to help? Do you have feedback or suggestions? We'd love to hear from you. Visit emotionresearch.com.au to get in touch, sign up to our newsletter and learn more. If you'd like to support our work, make a donation. Remember, your generosity fuels our vision and contributions over $2 Australian are tax deductible. See you next time.